The moment I discovered how easily love could twist into betrayal, I realized my family hadn't just abandoned me, they had rewritten my entire place in their world. What I thought was loyalty turned out to be a mask, and the people I trusted most were standing at the center of my undoing. I was 24 when I bought my first house. It wasn't much, just a modest two-bedroom place with weathered paint and a stubborn front gate that screeched every time it moved. The yard looked like it hadn't seen a lawnmower in months, maybe years, but to me, it was freedom. For the first time in my life, I owned something that was mine, untouched by anyone else's influence. At first, I thought my family would be proud of me. I expected congratulations, maybe even admiration for carving out my own path, but instead of pride, I was met with thinly veiled smirks, quiet judgment, and a cold distance I couldn't quite explain. That distance grew sharper each time I tried to share a piece of my happiness with them. It began with little comments. My brother, Daniel, would say things like, "Cute place." Though, I guess it's more of a starter shack than a starter home. My sister, Claire, would walk through the rooms with raised eyebrows, pointing out every flaw. "You'll need thousands just to fix this," she'd remark, her tone dripping with dismissal. I laughed it off at first, convincing myself they just didn't understand how much this place meant to me. But the truth was harder to ignore. Their visits became less frequent, their calls shorter, their words sharper. Every achievement of mine was dismissed as if it didn't count. I felt like an outsider in my own family, someone who was no longer worthy of their respect. Still, I tried. I invited them to barbecues, birthdays, and quiet evenings just to keep the bond alive. Each time, I convinced myself that maybe this would be the night things went back to the way they were, but each time, I was proven wrong. They'd show up late, leave early, and act like being around me was some kind of chore. Then came the moment that shifted everything. One Sunday afternoon, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen while I was helping set the table. Their voices were low, almost conspiratorial. My mother sighed. "Malcolm's wasting his time in that house. He thinks he's building a life, but really, he's building a burden." My father replied, "Don't worry, Daniel and Claire will inherit the important things. We'll make sure of that." My hands froze on the silverware. I felt a rush of heat crawl up my neck as the words sank in. They weren't just criticizing me, they were erasing me from their future. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just being excluded emotionally, I was being cut off from the legacy of the very family I had given my entire heart to. I stayed silent. I didn't confront them that day. Instead, I carried their words like a stone lodged deep in my chest. I replayed them every night while lying awake, staring at the cracks in my ceiling. I wondered what I had done to deserve this. Was my independence so offensive? Was my need to build my own life really a betrayal to them? The weight grew heavier with each passing week. Whenever I visited my parents' house, I noticed how warmly they treated Daniel and Claire. They spoke to them with admiration, praised their choices, and involved them in every decision. Meanwhile, I was left out of conversations, ignored when I offered ideas, and treated like my presence was optional. It wasn't long before the resentment began to show. At one family dinner, Daniel boasted about a new promotion at his job. My parents applauded him, raising their glasses in celebration. I shared news about finally finishing renovations on my house, hoping for a fraction of the same enthusiasm. Instead, Claire smirked and said, "Well, let's hope it doesn't collapse on you anytime soon." The table erupted in laughter, except for me. That was when the first crack in my restraint began to show. I wanted to scream, to demand why my efforts were always dismissed, but instead, I swallowed my anger, staring down at my plate while their laughter rang in my ears. I told myself I could handle it, that I didn't need their validation, but deep down, I craved it more than I wanted to admit. I wasn't just fighting for their recognition, I was fighting for my place in the family, for proof that I mattered. The day that changed everything came months later. I was called over to my parents' house for a serious family discussion. I walked in, expecting maybe a health scare or an important announcement. Instead, I found my parents, Daniel, and Claire gathered around the dining table with documents spread across it. My father cleared his throat. "Malcolm, we've been reviewing some things. It's time to settle how the family estate will be divided." His words were calm, almost businesslike, but I could hear the finality in his tone. As I sat down, I scanned the papers. My heart dropped. Everything, the house I grew up in, the land, the savings, was being split between Daniel and Claire. My name wasn't listed anywhere. I was invisible, erased on paper as easily as I felt erased in life. I looked up, stunned. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice trembling. "Why isn't my name on here?" My mother didn't flinch. "Malcolm, you've chosen your own path. You bought your own house, built your own life. You don't need anything from us." Daniel leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Guess you wanted independence so badly, you forgot it comes with consequences." The room spun around me. I could barely breathe as I realized the full weight of what was happening. My own family had officially decided I wasn't one of them anymore. The papers blurred before my eyes as I sat there, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air while they sat calmly, unmoved. My father tapped his pen against the table, waiting for me to accept their verdict like it was nothing more than a business deal. I wanted to yell, to demand how they could erase me so casually, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I pushed the papers back toward them and stood. "If this is how you see me," I said quietly, my voice shaking but firm, "then I guess I was never really part of this family to begin with." For a moment, silence filled the room, then Claire scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Malcolm. You've always been different. This just makes sense." Her words were the final nail in the coffin. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The night air felt heavy, but for the first time in months, I also felt strangely free. If they had already decided I didn't belong, then maybe it was time I stopped begging for their acceptance. The following weeks were brutal. I kept waiting for a call, a text, any sign that someone regretted what had happened, but none came. My phone stayed silent. I ate alone, slept alone, and wrestled with the kind of loneliness that crawled under your skin and refused to leave. But something inside me began to shift. At first, it was just survival. I had no choice but to throw myself into work, repairs on my house, and anything else to keep my mind busy. Then survival turned into progress. I poured my frustration into long nights at the office, determined to prove to myself that I wasn't the failure they painted me to be. The more I focused on myself, the clearer things became. I realized my worth didn't depend on their approval. I had built a life with my own hands, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. My house wasn't just a building, it was proof that I could stand on my own, even when those closest to me had turned their backs. Months turned into years. My career flourished in ways I hadn't expected. Promotions came, not because of favoritism or handouts, but because of relentless effort. I invested carefully, learned from every mistake, and little by little, I built something far greater than what had been denied to me. Then, one summer afternoon, fate threw me back into their world. I was at a community event, speaking about a project I had spearheaded, when I saw them, my parents, Daniel, and Claire, standing in the crowd. For the first time, their expressions weren't mocking or dismissive, they were stunned. After my speech, they approached me. My mother's voice wavered as she said, "Malcolm, we had no idea you'd come this far." My father nodded, looking older and wearier. "You've done well for yourself." Daniel and Claire stayed quiet, but I could see it in their eyes, the recognition, maybe even regret, though neither would admit it. For a moment, I felt the old ache rise inside me, the desperate need for their approval, but it faded quickly. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had already won, not by seeking revenge, but by becoming everything they claimed I could never be. I smiled politely. "I built my life without you," I said, my voice steady, "and I'll keep building it, with or without your support." Their silence was louder than any apology they could have offered. As I walked away, I realized I no longer carried the stone in my chest. I had set it down the moment I chose myself over their expectations. Betrayal had once broken me, but in the end, it became the fire that forged me into someone stronger, someone unshakable. My family may have erased me from their legacy, but I had written my own story, and this time, I was the author. And if you've ever felt cast aside, overlooked, or betrayed by the very people you thought would always stand by you, remember this: their rejection does not define your value. You are more than their labels, stronger than their doubts, and capable of building a life so radiant it silences every voice that ever tried to dim your light. So ask yourself, Are you ready to stop waiting for validation and start writing your own story? If this journey resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.